what am I ultimately trying to create? Where's my end goal? Where do I want to be in 10 to 15 years? What does that life look like? What is that guy like? What can I face tonight that'll allow me to wake up a little bit more like that guy tomorrow? What can I learn about myself? What can I integrate? Ultimately, what do I need to do in order to become this version of myself? What up, everybody? Welcome back to Operation Moksha. As always, I'm your host, Chris Orozco, and I'm going to share something with you really special that a lot of you have been asking about for a very long time. And I'm going to be sharing with you my daily shadow integration practice and what that really looks like and how to go about doing it. Now, I have a series of courses that I'm releasing that will teach you each individual aspect of this. I have 2 out at the moment. The first one is the vision creation course, and that's where I start. So my daily shadow integration practice looks like this. From the moment that I wake up, the first thing that I do is set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes. And for that 15 minutes, what I'm doing is I'm imagining the version of my life that I'm trying to create. I project my vision for my ideal life into my mind. And on top of that, I project the ideal identity of the ideal version of myself I'd like to be within that life. I try to make it feel as if I already am that person. I try to embody that vision. I try to embody that identity. I try to embody the version that can live that way effortlessly with a sense of grace and fun where I can thrive and really just enjoy myself. And as a result of doing this, what ends up happening is all the different parts of my personality that don't think I can have that are insecure, that have doubts and fears and all these different kinds of things, they ultimately start to speak up. As I am going through my vision and my identity and anchoring into who I want to be that day, I'm also holding space for all the parts of myself that say I can't be that or shouldn't be that or can't have it or whatever, and I'm trying to integrate those parts. I'm listening for, okay, it's like this is who I want to be. This is the kind of life I want to live. Why does this part of me say I can't have that? Why does this part of me say I can't be that? Like, what's going on? What reason do you have? And then I listen to it, and I ultimately try and find the reasons. I deal with those reasons. I meet the needs, whatever it is I got to do in order to integrate that part of myself, and then I'm that much closer to my dream, that much closer to my identity, or at the very least, I can be able to hold those emotions a little bit better than I could the night before as I go out throughout my day. Now, I also do this at night. I do this for hours at night, but my nightly practice is a little bit different than my morning practice. My morning practice is more focused on what I have to do that day. My morning practice is the smaller, more concrete, mundane stuff. It's like, okay, I've got this coaching call. I've got to go to the studio and record this video. I've got to put out this piece of content. I've got to go do this later in the day. Who do I want to be while I go do those things? Who can I be today while I go about doing those things that is going to be the most in alignment with my vision, that is going to be most in alignment with my ideal identity, and then what parts of my personality can I integrate or at the very least hold space for as I go and do those things. But at night, I generally shut down all of my screens and stuff around 9, and 9:30 or so is when I go inside and I start doing stretches. I start kind of reflecting and getting myself ready to go to bed at around 11 or so. And as I'm spending those few hours, what I'm really doing is projecting the meta vision, right? So in the morning, I'm looking at like the stuff I have to do that day and who I want to be there. But then at night, when my mind is freed up and all my shit's done for the day, I project my big meta vision. It's like, okay, so what am I ultimately trying to create? Where's my end goal? Where do I want to be in 10 to 15 years? What does that life look like? What is that guy like? What can I face tonight that'll allow me to wake up a little bit more like that guy tomorrow? What can I learn about myself? What can I integrate? Ultimately, what do I need to do in order to become this version of myself? And it's this really interesting paradox, right? Because shadow integration is the practice of integrating opposites, which means that as you integrate opposites, you're going to have opposing psychological forces. You're going to have internal paradoxes. There's going to be the part of you that says, I want this thing, and there's going to be the part of you that says, I can't have that thing or shouldn't be that thing or whatever. And a big part of dealing with shadow integration is being able to hold these polarities, being able to hold these paradoxes. Say, this part of me wants this thing, this part of me says I can't have the thing. And allowing both to really be equal and valid. That is a huge element of what the shadow integration practice actually is. So I'm going about my day, I'm imagining my ideal life, and I'm holding space for the parts of myself that say I can't have them. And if you hold space long enough, eventually they harmonize. Eventually the part of you that says I can have this thing, if you listen to it enough and you allow it to speak, the part of you that says I can't have this thing will give you reasons. And if you address those reasons, then either A, they're going to be valid, and you're going to need to retool your vision a little bit because you're like, oh, actually, I don't want that thing, or I can't actually have that thing, and it'll be for good reasons. Or it'll be like, I can't have this because I'm a piece of shit, and then you like love that part of you until it doesn't believe that you're a piece of shit anymore. And then the space between the two gets smaller and smaller. And instead of being like, I want this thing and I can't have it, it's like, I can't have this thing and here's all the things we need to address in order to create it. They start to work together, they start to integrate, and that's when you have the integration of opposites. So I'm practicing this every morning and every night and throughout the day. I wouldn't recommend doing it throughout the day until you get really good at it, because I've essentially just programmed my mind to do this all the time. I'm doing it right now, actually. And eventually you can get to that point, but what I'd recommend in the beginning is just doing the nightly practice. And the reason I suggest just doing the nightly practice is because you don't really know what it's gonna bring up in you, right? Because it's like you could be imagining your vision and it could bring up some really big fear or some really big anxiety, that dealing with that and trying to hold space for that could kind of dysregulate you. And if you do it in the morning, it could make the rest of your day a lot harder. You'll have more emotion to hold throughout the day than maybe your capacity will allow for, and maybe that is good for you. So when you start the practice at night, what that'll allow you to do is start to get an idea of, okay, as I do this visioning process, these are the emotions that come up. This is how intense they are. This is how much energy it's going to cause me to hold them. And then when you do your morning practice, you can take that into consideration and decide how big you're going to imagine, decide how deep you're going to go, and ultimately decide how much emotion you're going to bring up, and it'll show you your capacity. So it's important to work within your capacity, because if you work outside of your capacity, what's going to happen is just like when you work out. You'll work out and you'll work really fucking hard and you'll injure yourself and you'll have to take a few days to rest and recover, and those are days that you could have been working out. Those are days you could have been developing strength if you didn't go so fucking hard. Whereas if you work within your capacity, lift a little bit less weight, but make it so that you can show up the next day, then you can be consistent. You don't have to take 2 steps forward and 5 steps back. You can just keep going on a consistent level, stretch your capacity in a sustainable way so that you can just allow your growth to compound on itself, grow over time, and ultimately become exponential. That's what you really want. And so the nighttime practice allows you to get a sense of your capacity so you can take that into your next day, and it just gives you a safe place to practice. So if you do get overwhelmed, you can go for a walk, you can soothe yourself, sleep it off, and wake up refreshed for the next day. And so consistency is also an essential part of the shadow integration practice, because when you're integrating a part, it's a living thing and it has to develop trust with you, which is really kind of weird. These things your parts have their own bizarre kind of sentience where they have opinions about you. They have opinions about the other parts that interact with them. They have opinions about your life. They have opinions about your choices. They think and feel, and they have their own worldview. It's really kind of bizarre and kind of surreal when you first get into it. But because they're living things, they will trust you or not. And trust is built with consistency and sustainability. Like imagine this. Imagine you had a friend, and 1 out of every 30 days, your friend is just fucking amazing. They're just the best friend you could possibly imagine. But then for the other fucking 29 days, they don't pay you any attention at all. Every time you have something to say, they shut you up and push you into a little corner and tell you that you don't deserve to exist and blah, 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 blah. And then at the end of every 30 days, they're like, hey, do you love me yet? Do you like me yet? Do you trust me yet? Are we friends yet? It's like, no, you're not fucking friends yet. It's like you need that friend to be there for you consistently. That's how trust is built. That's how acceptance and relationships are built, is by consistently showing up in a way that makes the other person want to engage with you. When you're integrating a fractured part of your psyche, that part of you probably doesn't like you very much, probably doesn't trust you very much, because you've pushed it off in the shadows. You've told it that it's bad. You've told it that it doesn't deserve to exist pretty much every day for as long as it's existed. So it probably doesn't like you. It probably doesn't trust you. And it needs to be able to build that trust with you. And when you practice every day, making contact with those parts of yourself, allowing them to be seen, allowing them to be felt, allowing them to be loved, allowing them to be understood, nurtured, and and made to feel like their needs matter and that you're listening for what their needs are and actually meeting those needs. If you treat any part of yourself that way over a long enough period of time, trust will build, it'll relax, it'll like you, and ultimately it'll get integrated. So it's important to work within your capacity also because that's a big part of trust. Like if you're pushing this thing so hard, then it's just like, whoa, calm the fuck down. But like, I'm scared, I'm hurt, like give me some space. And so you want to be able to allow it to unfold in the way that it needs to and in its own timing. And consistency allows you to do that because you're not in a rush. You're just like, okay, here's the person I want to be. Here's how I want to live. Here's all the parts of me that say I can't have it. I'm just going to allow them to exist, love them as much as I can, hold them to the degree that I can, not overwhelm myself, and then go to sleep and start fresh the next day. That will have them trust you a little bit more each time you wake up. That'll have your capacity expanded a little bit more each time you wake up. And the beautiful thing about it is as you're doing your visioning, if you're telling yourself this is who you really are, and you really start to believe that, your mind will start to organize itself around that. It'll say, all right, this is who I am. I better start living that way. I better start creating a reality that matches my beliefs. So that's what your mind does. And as you start integrating more parts, that belief gets stronger. And the more that belief gets stronger and gets cemented and integrated, the more your mind has no choice but to give you a reality that matches that. So you want to make sure that this is happening smoothly so that you can just have a consistent experience of believing this more and more, expanding your capacity to believe it more and more, getting more and more parts of yourself online with it, rather than having this jumbled like, oh, I worked really hard and now I don't, and like I don't practice every day, so these parts don't actually like me, and blah, 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 blah. You want to be consistent, you want to be stable, you want to be sustainable, and you want to make sure that these parts of you can trust you over time so they can ultimately get integrated. So like I said, I do this every single night. I do this for hours every night because I want to wake up each morning a little bit more embodied in my identity, a little bit more connected to my vision, a little bit more feeling like I am that fucking guy. And so the more I do this at night, the more I know I'll sleep, and I'll tell my mind as I go to sleep, like, keep processing this shit. I want to believe this more when I wake up than I did when I went to sleep. And your brain will do that. You can even tell your brain what time to wake up, and it'll wake up at that time. It's really kind of crazy. So you can say, I want to process these ideas while I sleep. I want to believe this more while I sleep. And your brain will actually even give you dreams to match that. So I do this every night. I wake up and I take stock of like, okay, like this is what I was working on last night. Do I feel like that more? Like, okay, great. Like what needs to be fed? What do I have to do that day? Can I imagine myself doing that even more aligned with my identity and my vision? And if you just keep that practice going, eventually you get really good at programming your mind to say, this is who I am, this is the life that I lead, and you start to believe it more and more and more, and next thing you know, it just becomes natural. So this is what I've been doing over the last 10 years, every single night, every single morning. It's completely changed my life from the inside out on a fundamental level, and I will continue to do it every day because I've never found anything else that allows me to reprogram my mind in a way that is not only extremely efficient, but sustainable. Because there's a lot of other different ways to reprogram your mind, but if they don't stem from building a personal relationship with the parts of your mind that were creating certain things, to me, it's not really as sustainable as it could be. Because I don't want to just think differently. I don't want to just act differently. I want to have a personal relationship with the parts of myself that were doing whatever dysfunctional thing they were doing. And I want those parts to be seen, and I want them to be felt, and I want them to be loved, and I want them to understand that, like, I know you have needs, and those needs are going to get integrated, and I want to become more whole. And integration is the only thing that has allowed me to not only reprogram my mind, but allow me to have a personal relationship with each element of who I am, make sure that it feels loved and integrated so that I can have this really beautiful, holistic sense of confidence and a strong sense of self, and just be able to be free and be who I am and build a life based on that. So if you've been wanting to know what my shadow integration practice looks like, this might be more than what you bargained for, but this is what I do every day. And if you can adopt even a little bit of this, I can teach you how. I've got courses to teach you how. I highly recommend this more than anything else I've ever found. Let me know if you need help. Check out the courses if you want to learn. I can coach you one-on-one. I know it's a little bit tricky. It's fairly intuitive. All you need to do is be loving these different parts of yourself as they come up in contrast with your vision and your identity. Give them space to exist, and ultimately they will become integrated. I'm Chris Roscoe. I love you, and I'll see you next time.